Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? All right. Well, first I'd like to thank everyone here for taking the time out on a beautiful Chicago fall Saturday afternoon to come and learn about food. And I'd first and foremost like to thank Sant Rajinder Singh Ji Maharaj for providing this avenue and this opportunity to come speak with everyone here. And I want to thank all of you for taking this special time out. So what are we talking about? I want to tell you a little bit about myself first, and then I'll tell you actually what the topic is. So my name's Kenny Duggal. I grew up just down the street in Wheaton, and born here, parents coming from India, and our family has been vegetarian for generations. And our family primarily became vegetarian because of ethical reasons, for fair treatment of animals, because they're living beings just like we are. And growing up here, I was the only vegetarian in my school. Grew up in the public schools, went to Catholic schools later, the only Sikh person in Catholic schools. My dean used to tell me that if I didn't shave, that I was going to get detention. He told me this every day for 4 years. I said, okay, this is interesting. But but people had very different interpretations or ideas of some of our lifestyle choices. And as a lifelong vegetarian, I was constantly questioned. Why are you doing that? How is that good for you? And so there's been a lot of misconception out there about a plant-based or vegetarian diet. After high school, I went on to college and then medical school, and I work as a rehab doctor, and I see people who've had some type of catastrophic event in their life. It could have been a big accident with fractures, it could be a stroke, a heart attack, diabetic complications leading to amputations, and all sorts of life-changing events. And the thing that became very evident to me is that our food is killing us. And there's no doubt about it. Now, in medical school, we get one afternoon in 4 years about nutrition. 4 years. It's about 50 plus grand each a year for tuition. So we spend somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 to learn and to become a doctor. Oh, this beautiful thing. We don't know anything about food. And so I took it upon myself to study it. And to find out, okay, what is the real information out there? What is true evidence that we can learn from and that we could study to see how is what our food and our diet is impacting our health? And through that, I got to the point where I wanted to know, okay, what are the truths out there and what are the myths? Because there's a lot of myths surrounding a plant-based diet. So today I'd like to bust some of those myths and to tell you whether you're a first-time comer learning about nutrition, whether you've already gone or experimented with a plant-based diet and you're dealing with a lot of interesting questions from family and friends as to your new lifestyle choices, and hopefully providing you with some answers based on evidence, based on fact that we know as to what are the benefits and what are the realities. So let's see. All right, so exposing the myths about a plant-based diet. First, I want to get into some basic definitions if possible. And first of which is a vegan. A vegan does not consume any animal products whatsoever. And then within the classification of vegetarian, there are many different types. There's a lacto-vegetarian, which is traditionally what myself and my family have been coming from India. That is people who don't eat meat but do consume dairy. Now in India, the cow has been considered sacred. And so because of that, they have been treated very well. Traditionally, you would go and get milk from the cow that was either your own cow or your neighbor's or in your neighborhood, and you treated that animal well. That animal ate grass as they should and were treated ethically, and the milking process was thought to be something that was beneficial to them, so they were less uncomfortable, and beneficial to the family because they could take from that milk and use it. Modern day has completely changed that. Now, if you've ever seen or read anything about factory farming of dairy, we know that these cows are hooked up to their udders are hooked up to machines about 22 hours a day. They are not fed grass. In fact, if you go and buy a steak, they promote a grass-fed steak, like saying this is grass-fed beef, meaning that all that other stuff you're eating that isn't specified as grass-fed, they're eating stuff they're not even supposed to eat. They're not genetically engineered to eat. And so the dairy industry has gone completely awry recently. Ovo-vegetarians also consume eggs, fertilized and unfertilized, and then lacto-ovo-vegetarians would consume dairy and eggs. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, plant-based diets are here. This is 2019, things have changed significantly. And so in the US population of adults, at least 12% of people have either tried or continue on a vegan or vegetarian diet now. 88% have still never attempted this diet, but 12% have, and that number is on the rise. And it's not only here, it's worldwide. I know this graph is a little smaller, but it shows that in certain countries, such as the UK, vegetarian and vegan plant-based diets are as much as 10 to 15% of the normal population. In India, that number is as high as 40%. So all over the world, people are looking at this diet and saying, okay, how can I do that? How can I change what I'm doing to get that better? And in just a simple study that was done in New Zealand, they looked at how many people were on a plant-based diet in 2011 and in 2015, and that number across every statistical category rose. For men, for women, for different age groups, for the young, the old, for different geographical areas of the island. And this is something that's paralleled all throughout the world. We're seeing this everywhere. It's not just something that we're seeing in New Zealand. So recently, a lot of fast food has been turning towards this because fast food does not move on science. Fast food moves on profit. And so the money is there now. We're looking at McDonald's, who's starting to advertise the PLT, the plant lettuce and tomato burger. Burger King now has the Impossible Whopper, which is using the Impossible Burger, completely plant-based, as is White Castle, which has Impossible Sliders. And Taco Bell, who now has a vegan Crunchwrap and a vegan menu. Now, for those who are vegetarians, Taco Bell's kind of been our go-to forever. Uncle Taco Bell's been one of my best friends my whole life, but it was beans and lettuce and tomatoes, things we eat, but I was always one of those guys getting the extra cheese on it. Now they are starting to look at vegan cheeses and other items that are actually a little healthier for you, so that's nice. So a big question is, why am I going plant-based? This might be something you've questioned yourself, whether you've already done that change, or it's something you're considering and you're thinking, okay, this might be something that I want to do in the future. And let's expose those myths about it. Now, the first myth I'd like to mention, I'll give a great anecdote of my father's arrival to this country. My father was born in India. He came here in 1968 to go to graduate school after he completed his bachelor's degree in India. And he was the only person around with a turban and a beard. He was one of the only vegetarians around. Actually, one of the families who first met him here, she's here today. And everybody told him, "What do you mean you're vegetarian? You're gonna die." And that's still a belief that people have today. People think that if you're vegan or plant-based, that you have no nutritional food to eat and you will die. Now, technically, they're right, because no one has got out of this game alive. We all die. So they're not wrong, but they're not exactly right either. So this is a myth that's very clearly busted. We've done very good research on this, and vegans actually live almost 8 years longer than omnivores. And this has been studied over in the Loma Linda University in California. General health measures across the board. We use BMI constantly as one of our basic measurements of your overall weight, and to see are you in a healthy weight class or are you not. And if you're lower than a certain number, you're considered underweight. There's an ideal weight, then there's overweight, obese, morbidly obese. And if you look at diets and different BMIs across the board, the top is a vegan diet. It's the only category of diet that actually is normal weight. The only one. Even if you just eat milk and eggs, a lacto-ovo vegetarian, you've already entered the overweight realm. Fish eaters or pescatarians have also been in overweight. Semi-vegetarians are overweight. And a normal omnivore or meat eater is on that very upper limit of what's considered overweight prior to becoming obese. When you look at how many people are actually based on their diet, or within that normal weight class, again, the people who refrain from all animal products, over 60% of them are of normal weight or of normal BMI. And that number drops significantly by the introduction of dairy, fish, and more meat. So what is related to obesity? I think of it as a package deal, okay? With obesity and overweight BMI, you have cardiovascular risk that is increased. Now that means more heart attacks, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, stroke, cancer, sleep apnea, arthritis, mood disorders like depression and anxiety, and malnutrition. And you might find that it's interesting that cancer's on there. Yeah, meat causes cancer. In fact, vegans and vegetarians have a 75% less chance of getting cancer than those who introduce animal products into their body. And this was actually very well studied by Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who spoke here earlier this year. And he performed the largest study on human nutrition known to man. It was called the China study. And he extrapolated that, yes, those who have the most plant-based part of their diet have the least chance of having cancer. And those who had the most animal products in their body had the most chances of getting cancer. Now, if you look at this graph over here, it shows in the red are the countries, the number of deaths that come from heart disease and cancer. And in green is the number of calories, percentage of your diet that comes from plant foods. And it's very clear that as the red decreases, which is the death from cancer and from cardiovascular disease, the green has risen. And that holds true to countries all across the world. And unfortunately, we're the second most on the left here in the USA, where we have almost 80% of our deaths are caused from heart disease and cancer, and barely 10 to 15% of our calories are coming from plants. And if you look over at Laos and Thailand on the right, they have very little heart disease and cancer, and all they're eating is green. So there must be something to this. Now, what are some of the other health benefits of a plant-based diet? Well, your weight and obesity are lower, your cholesterol, especially your LDL cholesterol, is lower. Now, there's no cholesterol in plants. It's not there. Cholesterol comes from animal-based proteins and products. Cardiovascular disease, way less with the plant-based diet. High blood pressure, diabetes, and the risk of diabetes, especially diabetes type 2. Type 1 diabetes is a genetic difference. Type 2 is a completely lifestyle-based disease. And there is no need for there to be anybody in the world with type 2 diabetes. If you eat the right food and don't eat the wrong food, you will not get diabetes type 2. And that's the most common cause. Now, people who already have diabetes, you can completely eliminate it by eating all the plant-based food, and you can get your blood sugar under way better control. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to necessarily clear all of it from your system. If you had, consumption going on of animal proteins and products for years and years and years, it's already done some of its damage, and not all of it is reversible. But you would be surprised at how much people can lower their needs for insulin or other blood glucose lowering medications. Now, I don't want to ask anybody here if they have diabetes, that's your own personal health, but how normal has it become in life? And if you yourself haven't done this, I'm sure someone in your family or your close ones has, where they're injecting themselves with insulin every day. to control their blood sugar, and we think it's normal. Now, what are we actually doing? We're actually harvesting insulin from pigs. We're putting it into tubes and sending it all over the place. You're going to your doctor, they're writing a prescription, you're getting this from the pharmacy, and you're taking pig hormone and injecting it into your belly. What part of that sounds natural to anybody? And this is an acceptable treatment. This is what we look at as a society and say, hey, this is normal and this is the right thing to do. I know a lot of people who have to take shots in their stomach all day and they're fed up with it. And the truth is, they don't need to. They can change this. They can reverse a lot of this disease. Now, chest pain, another big part of cardiovascular disease, and inflammation in your body. I was just speaking with the medical director at one of the nursing homes I work with yesterday, and he's been plant-based for about 20 years or so. And he was actually quoting studies that came out in the early 80s, and he's like, you were just a little pup at that time. But he actually got injured. He was an ex-athlete. He got injured really badly. He used to play football, and he was trying to recover and do better for himself. And he said he couldn't, stop taking Motrin, which is ibuprofen, to get the inflammation down. So he started looking into the research, and yesterday he was talking to me about this. He was quoting studies from the early 80s that showed that plant-based diets had the lowest levels of inflammation, and actually they had antioxidants that decreased your inflammation more than any other diet. So he went plant-based then, he got off all of his meds, and he's been pain-free ever since. It's been quite remarkable. Other health benefits, and I can definitely speak to this, is increased energy. Now, some of you in the room might know me, and some of those who know me have maybe seen me grow up since I was a little kid. And some of you are new to me and strangers, and you're all new friends, so that's exciting. But I've never been tired in my life. Now, until 2 months ago, I will say, 2 months ago, I had a baby girl, and that first week of her life was the first time I looked at my wife and I told her, I've never felt tired before. This feels horrible. And she was just shocked. She was looking at me like, what do you mean you've never felt tired? I've honestly never been tired. And now I get some sleep. My mother-in-law's in town, that helps. But it's phenomenal. In medical school, we used to be in the hospital on 30-hour shifts every fourth day. Never tired. Everyone's like, oh, you go home and sleep the whole day. Wouldn't even take a nap. It was never an issue. It's amazing how much your food can affect how you feel. Now, when you think about it, if you're eating an animal-based product, you're putting death into your body. So you should feel like death. You should feel tired. Everybody I've ever gone to school and worked with, about 2:30 in the afternoon, is like, okay, what'd you eat for lunch? Well, I had a Big Mac and some extra large fries. Well, yeah, you should feel like crap. Because that's what you just put into your body. I would feel horrible if I just did that. What my lunch is, a giant glass of green juice every day. It's literally the vegetables and fruits you can find around, all squeezed together. That's my lunch, and I feel great. You will have better sleep with a plant-based diet. Your mood is better. There's a very clear, distinct causation, not correlation, causation between animal protein in your body and depression. And when you think about what's happening right now with factory farming of animals are being raised to be slaughtered. That affects their hormone output. Now, cortisol is our stress hormone, and we need cortisol. Cortisol traditionally has told us that when a bear comes out here, I need energy to run away so that I can be safe. And so cortisol is a good thing. But if you're scared constantly of something around you that's going to injure you, your cortisol level will be high all the time, and that wreaks havoc on your body. It's meant to be there for short bursts of energy, and that's it. And so if you think of these animals that are constantly living in fear that their loved ones next to them are being slaughtered, or they're hooked up to udders or to machines on their udders 22 hours a day, they have a lot of stress. So those hormones go into them And those products that are being consumed by humans, you're getting all those hormones in you. And so there's a clear correlation with depression and mood disorder in food. Now the second myth might be the most common that I've been asked about, but I'm sure some of you have all heard this. Where do you get your protein? Right? And has anybody here seen Pulp Fiction, the movie Pulp Fiction? Okay, so I like this meme. It says, ask me where I get my protein again. I dare you. I double dare you. Say protein one more time. Because this is I would be fed up of being asked this all the time if I was any of you, and I know I am. Because it shows that people really don't understand what is in their food. Now here's just a picture of 4 bodybuilding, very malnourished vegans. These guys look really small, right? They have trouble getting protein, don't they? So let's see what we are as humans and as a species. What we do know is that we evolve over time. We have been around for generations upon generations upon generations, and over time the world has changed, and our bodies have genetically adapted to changes, and that has allowed us to survive. Charles Darwin studied this and he said survival of the fittest. You either adapt or you die. And if that species adapts, you live and you move on, and that's why we as humans, because of our large brains, have adapted so much and survived for so long. But, okay, so as our bodies adapt, that would make it so that as we're infants, that whatever nutrition that our mothers are able to produce for us should be our ideal nutrient. That should be our ideal food. Does that make sense to everybody? That human breast milk would probably be the most ideal to what is healthy for a human. That make sense? Okay, well let's look at human breast milk. And I know some of the numbers might be small for you in the back, but human breast milk only has about 9 grams of protein in it. Now, cow's milk, which we use as a substitute for human milk, has about 35 grams of protein in it. And that makes sense. What is a cow's weight compared to a human's weight? Right? They're a lot bigger than us. I know people who grew up in the country might have, they tell jokes about, and I don't know if it's true or not, but about cow tipping, about how tough it is to try to push a cow over onto its side. Yeah, they're huge. They're very heavy animals, right? So the food that a cow's mom produces for a baby cow is developed for that baby cow to turn into a huge cow, right? The food that a human creates for a baby is meant to make that baby into an adult human, right? So now we're trading. We're giving that cow mom, and we're taking her milk and putting it in our human baby, trying to make our baby into a human cow. Does that make any sense? I don't know about you, but I've never met a human who's producing milk to feed it to a baby calf. Seems crazy, doesn't it? So why are we doing the same? We only need about 13% of our diet's calories coming from protein. That's an ideal nutritional balance. We do not feed on protein. That is not what our bodies crave. Our bodies actually crave carbohydrates. The most energy-hungry organ in our body is our brain. And our brain only eats glucose, and that is only found in carbohydrates. Our brain eats sugar. That's what it needs. Our brain does not eat protein. It does nothing for the brain. And if you are dying, if you're not getting oxygen, if your blood is pumping, your brain is the first thing to go because your brain is not getting sugar delivered to it, and you will start to go under brain death and brain damage. Now you might see as you drive around, they have all these billboards now for stroke awareness. And it says, time is brain. This is absolutely true. If you are having stroke symptoms, you need to get to the hospital ASAP, because the longer that your brain is not getting blood flow and not getting sugar, essentially, those parts of your brain will start shutting off and stopping to work. It has nothing to do with protein. It has absolutely nothing to do with protein. So we we should look at, okay, what is protein really important for? Okay, what is it? It's a building block. It's a building block of your blood, your skin, cartilage, your bones, enzymes, but primarily your muscle, right? We need that to become strong. And, on average, we say, okay, for a general American, we need about 0.36 grams per pound of protein. And, if you're an athlete, you need to take more than that because you have a higher need of a requirement for muscle. So you take about twice as much protein as you would if you were an athlete. Now let's look gram for gram. Let's put beef up next to broccoli, right? In 100 calories of beef, you have 6.4 grams of protein. 100 calories of broccoli, you got 11. It's almost twice as much protein in broccoli as there is beef. Now, we were never taught this. We were taught our nutrition by the food industry. The food industry likes to sell product, and they're influenced by the meat and the dairy industry. So they've fed all this information to the lobbyists in DC who have made our traditional food pyramid that we're taught in school. Everyone familiar with this? And it puts all these things in a completely weird order that sells the most product. There's not as much money to be made in selling broccoli as there is in raising cattle to sell beef. So because of that, we've been given very bad information. Now, I like to look at this fact because this is our top 10 sources of protein from vegetarian plants. Obviously they're vegetarian. If you look on the bottom right, it says protein in meat, and beef has about 25% of it is protein. Spinach, it's about 49%. Spinach, kale, broccoli, every vegetable that's listed here has more protein than eggs. And, we all grew up watching Rocky and other stuff. And yeah, you drink egg whites, you're thought to be, I'm a tough guy, I get all this protein. Should have had a smoothie. So there are an innumerable amount of protein sources, and they come from grains, beans, legumes, nuts. There are so many veggie substitute or meat substitute products on the menu now, whether it's at your restaurant or at your grocery store. There's no shortage of protein out there. The problem is that we don't need a lot. We eat a lot more than we need, and we're actually causing kidney damage by doing that. Our kidneys can only tolerate so much protein. So we do have to remember, balance our diet out. Don't eat too much protein. Eat a good amount of fat. Healthy fats, but fat. Eat a good amount of carbohydrates. And anytime you are, for example, a performance athlete and you are increasing your protein consumption and requirement, drink more water because you have to flush your kidneys out, otherwise that will damage them overall. Now, next myth I have is that vegetarians are weak and sickly. And who do we look at in society as being our more physical specimens of just, you're an amazing human functioning person? Athletes. A lot of times we look at our athletes and we say, okay, and back in the day it was gladiators, and then it became other sports, and worldwide it's still soccer, and now we have a million sports going on. But we look at our top athletes and say that person is a physical specimen, that's someone I want to physically, as far as strength, emulate. Now, traditionally we've all been taught that, to be strong you need to eat all this amount of protein and you're going to be a big strong guy if you can do that. The world's strongest man, who just broke a record, and he just featured in a movie Game Changers. Has anyone heard this movie? It's a new documentary out on Netflix. I just got time finally to see it the other night. And they have the world's strongest man. He puts on what they call a yoke, which is essentially a big brace on top of you, and then they add weight to it. He picked this thing up over 1,200 pounds and carried it 30 some odd feet. No human has ever done this in the history of the world. He broke every record. Completely plant-based. You look at his biceps are wider than my chest. The dude is huge. And so, you look at it and you think, okay, well, athletes will do whatever they can to gain a competitive advantage in all athletics. If you have a better coach, you go for the better coach. If you have a better teammate, you're going to play with a better teammate. If you can take a supplement that's legal, you'll take it. Many athletes take the illegal ones too, but they're trying to gain a competitive edge. You train harder, you train longer. How come they're not eating the right thing? And so recently there's been a huge wave of athletes that have gone towards the plant-based movement, and they've seen that not only are they performing at even a higher level than they ever could, they're actually performing for way later in their life than normal athletes at peak performance perform. Now, possibly the greatest athlete of our generation as far as distance between number 1 and 2 is Serena Williams. She's 100% plant-based, as is her sister Venus. She, after having a child, won Wimbledon. No man's ever done that. She's incredible. And her male counterpart, Novak Djokovic, who is also at the top of his game, he's winning championships left and right. He actually just opened a vegan restaurant in Europe. When we look, and these are the top athletes in tennis. Now in America, what's our favorite sport? Football. Okay, who, and you might not like him, but who is the best player in football for the last 20 years? Tom Brady. Completely plant-based. 6 championships. You may or may not like him for whatever reason. As a Bears fan, we don't like him. But he is phenomenal. And he's one of the eldest quarterbacks to be playing in the league history. And he's still winning championships and just did again last year, and they probably will this year. Completely plant-based. NBA players. These guys are huge. Their average height's like 6'7". These are big guys. Well, the biggest star of all the young players in the NBA is Kyrie Irving. He's number 11 in the green. He just got a new team, and on opening night in the Brooklyn Nets, he put up 50 points. Completely plant-based. He said he's never had quicker recovery. He's running faster. And a lot of young players are starting to learn this. Now, for those who do follow basketball, you might have noticed, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade and Chris Paul, a few guys who were at the top of the league at the time, got together, and all in one off season, they all lost a ton of weight. They all lost 20 to 30 pounds in one off season. They went to a plant-based diet for that off season. They didn't continue it, but they did for that year, and all of them were faster. All of them had quicker recovery. They said their joints felt better. They weren't needing as much time in the treatment room after games, and they were performing at either the same or a higher level than they did before. Now, worldwide, the greatest soccer player in the world, has been for a while, is Leonel Messi, completely plant-based. Soccer is a sport in which you're literally running all the time. You're not stopping to move throughout the whole game. You just run. He's the best. So you can pick all the sports. You can look at strength bodybuilders. You can look at world's strongest men, cyclists, ultra marathoners who need all the endurance to keep going. In every sport in the world, the top athletes are moving towards a plant-based diet. And I was actually shocked in India, and the cricket's the big sport in India, and they have a gentleman, Virat Kohli. He went completely plant-based, and he's been one of the first and the biggest advocates out there. So this is not an American phenomenon. This is taking over the world. Now, what does the science say? The science says this: if you're looking at strength gain via proteins from a plant-based source or protein from an animal-based source, there is zero statistical difference. There is no advantage that meat has to vegetable protein. There is no difference in the muscle thickness, and there's no difference in grip strength. So this is talking about brute force, about how much weight can you push up, how strong can you be. Meat has no advantage. But where we did find the advantages were in the plants. They had better cardiorespiratory scores. They had better endurance. They had quicker recovery. This is a very clear statistical data that shows that plant-based protein has a clear advantage over animal-based protein. And when you're talking to our younger athletes who are becoming superstars, they're all moving towards this at a younger and younger age. And even with their protein supplements, they're no longer sticking to the whey and the casein that comes from dairy and cheese. They're going towards the pea protein, which is a lot healthier, a lot more bioavailable in our body than non-vegetarian diets. They're higher in phytochemicals. And calorie for calorie, they have a broader spectrum of nutrition than meat does. Now, meat contains zero fiber. Zero. Fiber only comes from plants. And one of the biggest nutritional things that I see here is that people have a very terrible digestive system. As a physician, I am constantly treating constipation. Constantly. And I've never really met a constipated Indian before. It's pretty amazing. But people eat meat which has zero fiber, and they don't drink enough water, and all of a sudden there's a blockage in their bowels. So it made me think, okay, well, what's going on here? Why is this such a big problem? Why is this not something that's a minor thing, but a very major thing? Our guts are not meant to digest meat. If you look at the stomach and the digestive system of a human versus the digestive system of an animal that is meant to eat meat, like a lion or something, you will see a clear difference. Animals that are meant to process meat have their mouth, a very small esophagus that goes into a very large stomach. And this stomach has thick lining. And this is because they have so much acid production in their bellies to break down meat that it's like a fire inside almost. And it's this giant furnace. They're literally liquefying all of the meat protein in there. And then it's a very short system out between that and the rectum. Very short, because they're not absorbing much after that. Now, a human's digestive system is very different than that. We have esophagus that's close to a foot long. Then you have your stomach. It's only the size of a fist. So think about that when you're eating, about portion control. Your stomach is only about this big. So when you eat a meal that's this big, where's it going to go? It's going to give you a reflux. It's going to go up, right? So control your diet. But after it gets out of the stomach, it enters the small intestines. And the small intestines is a very elaborate system of tubes that goes around and around and around and around and around. And as much as you can look at it and see it in pictures or in graphs, I think the most eye-opening time that I've ever seen someone's stomach is one of the first surgeries I was in medical school. And we were treating someone who had colon cancer, and they need to have some part of their colon removed. And you have to move aside the small intestines to look at the large intestines. And when it's all sprawled out there, you really have a different view of how large or how long your small intestines is. It goes on forever. And it's all, twisted up, and God's made it all fit in this small area, which is incredible. And then it goes into your large intestines, which goes up your side, across your body, down the left side, and then out your backside. The reason that we have a digestive system this way is because we don't produce nearly as much acid in our stomachs as meat eaters do. We produce just enough to help break down food, and then as soon as that's there, it goes into the intestines where things are constantly being reabsorbed. And it goes through such a long process because that's what our body is built to digest. Our body is built to digest vegetables and grains and fruits and real food. It is not made to digest animals or animal products. So when you think about that, we have to put into our body what we're designed to do. If this is a laptop up here, and I don't know what the brand is, but if I hooked up an Apple product to it, because it doesn't look like an apple on it, it's not going to work, right? If I take a plug here and I go across the world and I try to put it into a different socket, it's not going to work. It's not built for it, right? So what are we doing putting food into our system that we're not built for? It's going to malfunction. And if our body malfunctions, you end up constipated. You end up with digestive problems. You end up with sickness. And so as we look at our intake, we have to look at, okay, what are the nutrients our body needs and how do we provide them? And the way we provide them is by putting plants into our body. Now, as a vegan, there are certain things that you'll always get asked about. Where is your B12 coming from? Because B12 is something from an animal source. Well, here's the actual truth about B12. Omnivores don't have a good B12 level either. You don't. If you're eating meat, chances are you're also B12 deficient. So you need to supplement it. B12 is one of the few things you actually do need to probably supplement into your diet. Beyond that, vitamin D you can get from other sources. Mushrooms are a great source. Sunlight is a great source. I know we only have about 2 weeks of it in Chicago, but get outside. It's good for you. We are also built for that. Omega-3s. These are commonly found at your CVS or Walgreens in fish oil. Now, have you ever thought, why are fish high in omega-3s? Well, fish eat algae. What's algae? Algae is a sea plant. Algae has a lot of omega-3s. So if you're going to go to something, why are you going to the messenger? Go to the source, right? The source is the plant. So let's go straight to the source. And there are, in developing nations, iodine deficiency is an issue. In America, it's really not. We get plenty of iodine in all of our diets, so we don't really need that. But if you are in a third world country and they don't have iodinized salt, that is probably something else you would want to make sure you're focusing on. Now, with regards to strength, there are certain vegetarian foods that help even more than others. Beets are very high in nitrates. What these do is they actually cause your blood vessels to open up, and that allows more blood flow. So our blood vessel and our cardiovascular system is just an elaborate plumbing system. And all it is it's a bunch of tubes going from your heart to the rest of your body, delivering nutrients and collecting waste, and then it comes back to your heart. That's it. That's all it does. And while it's doing that, it's delivering things that are good, like oxygen and vitamins and nutrients to your body, and then it's collecting the waste and allowing you to eliminate it. The bigger those vessels are, the better your blood flow. Nitrates cause that to open up. Meat and animal products actually damage the lining of those blood vessels, of those pipes, making them stiff. Now, if you ever look at a rubber hose, it's thick, but you can bend it, versus looking at a steel pipe or a lead pipe, which you cannot move, right? A rubber hose can still get wider and smaller. A lead pipe cannot. So if you're putting animal protein into your body, you're causing your vessels to become more like lead pipes. You start putting plants into your body, they'll be more like a rubber hose that can move. And so we want that movement. We want blood to get to the rest of our body. Spinach is very high in iron, magnesium. Also, it's great for testosterone, which is why you see Popeye eating it all the time. Sweet potatoes, mushrooms, peppers, soybeans, all of these are actually great for strength building and for muscle. Now, the last myth I want to touch on is something that does affect a lot of people, and I've always tried to address this in a different thought process, but it's too expensive. It's too expensive to eat vegetarian or vegan. And it can be, but let's look at it. Now, if you eat everything on the left here, which is very processed, and you get it at the frozen section in the food store, or you're going to an expensive vegan restaurant, yeah, it can be very pricey. But if you look at on the right side, it's just a bunch of grains, vegetables, fruits. You go to the produce section, it's not actually very expensive. And I always want to tell people at this point, I was a lifelong vegetarian and a recent vegan convert. My college diet, as sad as this is, was primarily pizza and Doritos with Coca-Cola. Because in our college dorm in 2000, when I started university at the University of Illinois in Champaign, The only things I could eat in our cafeteria were spaghetti, grilled cheese, and it closed at 7 o'clock. And I wasn't used to eating dinner that early, so after that we'd order pizza. And we'd have pizza probably around 8 o'clock and then again at 2 in the morning. You know, you could be a very unhealthy vegetarian. There's no doubt about it. Now, interesting fact is when my dad moved here in '68, when he went to his cafeteria, all he could get was spaghetti and grilled cheese. So 32 years later, zero progress. Since 2000, it's been an explosion of progress. Probably thanks in part, mostly to Veggie Fest. So please do come. But you have to eat real food. You know, you can be vegan and eat Oreos all day. But I didn't say what are the myths about a vegan diet. I talked about a plant-based diet. And the real emphasis is this: eat real food, right? Eat vegetables, eat nuts, eat seeds, eat grains, eat fruits. These are all things that are real food. If you look at the ingredients on a box and you can't understand the words that are on there, it's probably not real food. Now, when we're talking about the physical cost of it, I say, okay, well, if you're talking about the cost of the food, talk about the cost of the disease too, because our food has definitely caused disease. So 20% of all the healthcare dollars in America go towards diabetes management. 20%, 1 out of every $5 that's spent on anything healthcare related, diabetes management. Overwhelming majority of that is type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is genetic. It's not a lifestyle thing. It's an absence of production of a hormone. Type 2 is a lifestyle disease. And that's what makes up most of it. We could prevent that cost. That is a very treatable cost. Cost of cardiovascular disease is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Cost of cancer is almost $1 trillion worldwide. So if we're talking about it's too expensive to eat fruits and vegetables, is it too expensive to go to Walgreens every week and pick up your prescription? How about pharmacy copays and insurance copays and doctor visits and surgeries and amputations? How about that? Because that should definitely be part of the conversation. And if we're sticking only to, okay, what's my grocery bill, we're not thinking of the big picture of what food is in our body. So, as a generality, if you already made a plunge into going towards a plant-based diet, I'm very happy for you. I'd like to encourage you to keep going forward. If you haven't, I hope this gives you some inspiration to maybe go in that direction. And think about what path are you going to take? And you know, if you look at this image here, we have a nice sunny day with all these fruits and vegetables and garden on the left, and then you have a lot of pills and cloudiness on the right. So I want to thank Sant Rajinder Singh Ji Maharaj for allowing this opportunity to be here and to speak with you. I want to thank the Science of Spirituality for hosting this beautiful event, and for Veggie Fest for bringing all of you guys here. And I want to thank all of you for all of your time, and I hope that I've been able to give you some information that you could take home, and hopefully you have some answers for those skeptics in your family or amongst your friends now. But it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you, and thank you again.
Am I limited to one question? I have so many. How about 2 questions or 3
Sure.
quick questions?
Sure.
I'm with some very healthy friends that I'm thankful for them bringing me here today.
Okay.
And when I get healthy and I tell them I'm being good, by the way, I tell them, hey, McDonald's is getting better, because there is better stuff. But when I feel I'm doing healthy, I drink V8 juice, and in 59 seconds out of the microwave, I can open a can of green beans, and it's delicious. They're saying that's not healthy. I would love your perspective on V8 juice and canned green beans. And then the last question would be, it's amazing. I'm going to do more research and change my life a little bit. I always try to improve myself. But without the elimination of meat and going completely plant-based, is any reduction in the amount of meat, does it approach helpfulness? Thank you.
I think they're Very, very excellent questions. First about V8 and canned foods. What I would say is by far what we do know scientifically is that the fresher the ingredients can be, the better received they are by your body. And the more preservatives that are needed, those preservatives do have adverse effect on our digestion. So while it's not bad, I would say it could be better. So if you could, for example, a V8 is a collection of 8 vegetables. If you're able to get those 8 vegetables, throw them in a blender and drink it, it'd be better off. There's no question. And same with canned foods versus fresh, or even frozen is a better alternative to canned if that's an option for you that's more practical. Fresh is always the best. There's a lot of science that has actually looked into once a food is cut and starts breaking down, how viable are those enzymes in your body? And what we do know is the longer that the cut to consumption time is, that food starts dying too. And so that nutritional value does decrease over time. So again, I would say fresher is better. But what you're doing is not bad. It could be improved. Now, the second question was...
Reduction of meat as opposed to elimination of meat.
Okay, now the reduction of meat absolutely is a step in the right direction. There's no question. One thing I'll take from Game Changers, the documentary I was just talking about, they showed a very interesting study. They took some athletes and they drew their blood after they had a plant-based burrito, and they looked and spun it down and they took a look at the plasma. And the plasma was a yellow strawish color, but you could see clearly through it. And that's how it should be. They then had 2 of the 3 athletes have a meat burrito, and then the third one had a vegetarian burrito again. They did the same thing, looked at their blood, and all of a sudden spun it down, and the plasma on the 2 people who had the meat was cloudy. On one meal. They were looking at one meal's difference on your body. And so if one meal can change the the composition of your blood that gravidly, yes, one meal can make you unhealthy. Now, if you look at the overall picture, yeah, if you're not able to fully eliminate meat or you're not ready for that step yet, yeah, that's still okay. You can do better. You can start to eliminate and start to maybe use some of the substitute products. What I would say over time is that the substitute products should probably be used as a go-between method rather than the only thing that you do. But the main thing is eating actual fruits, grains, vegetables, the actual food. We don't want to be stuck to eating processed vegetarian products our whole life either. So yeah, definitely I would encourage you to continue to reduce the amount of meat in your body and to add on other things. And over time, you'll see your taste changes. And what I've noticed is that people who have gone on this transition, but they're not all the way there yet, they'll say that, 90% of the time I'm good, but I was out with friends and I had a steak. I couldn't go to the bathroom for 3 days. You'll feel it. Your body will tell you if this is good or bad for you. So keep making those changes, keep making that, the reduction, and soon you'll see how significant the impact is on your body. But thank you for your questions. Right here in the front.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Very insightful. I didn't even know that I was going to be coming to this. I was at just a meditation thing before it, and I am a very stereotypical meat eater.
Okay.
So it was very good to have all of that information. One thing that I am curious about, a big health movement has been towards the keto diet or having fats be a huge part of it. Mm-hmm. What you're proponing has mostly carbs, so could you kind of expound on how those relate together?
Yeah, so I will say that I'm absolutely not into any trendy fad diet at all. What you eat should be sustainable. Any of us in this room probably, if we have the willpower, can go on an Atkins or a keto diet for a week, maybe 2 weeks, but they're not sustainable long term. If you're actually having to test your body to see if it's starving, that's probably not a good thing for your health. If you think about it like that. So what you want to do is something that's practical that you can do and keep to the overwhelming majority of the time. What I do is I have cheat meals. like twice or 3 times a week, I'll eat whatever I want. If I want to eat, and it's vegan, but if I want to have a full bag of chips, I'll eat it. I don't do it often, but I will. And so that keeps something where it's like, okay, I'm not feeling like I'm not having anything that I want to have. But over time, I've noticed that I don't eat like the junky chips. I'll eat like a whole grain, multi-grain tortilla, baked something, or pop chip, whatever. Your taste changes, and your body will respond well to certain things and not to certain things. But I would think with any type of diet that you're trying to look for, main thing is to keep it something that you can live by and you can do and you can hold yourself accountable to. You're setting yourself up for success. And if you make something so stringent and so restrictive that it's unsustainable, you're just going to feel bad about it, and then you're going to be less likely to continue. Now, with any of the fad diets, they're all similar to me. Unfortunately, in my mind, the Atkins, a keto, a paleo, they're fads. They're not sustainable, real ways of thinking. And I know paleo has been another one that's been so big, and people talk about, we want to eat what the cavemen ate. The cavemen ate beans and grains and fruits and vegetables. And yeah, some of them had meat, but their life expectancy was like 27. You want to live to be 27? Good for you. I think we can do better, So sustainability is key. Whatever is practical and sustainable is what I would recommend. And then yes, right next door.
Can you suggest a resource to find a physician or physician specialists who support a plant-based diet?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually a committee. It's been started by Dr. Neil Barnard. He was one of our keynote speakers at Veggie Fest. It's the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM. And I believe the website is pcrm.org. I know on our Veggie Fest website we have tons of resources available, so I would definitely look there as well. But there are more and more physicians going down this road and starting to actually take it upon ourselves and our responsibility to study the nutrition, because again, the medical schools don't give us that training. They don't. And so a lot of bodies and people have gone through that and are starting to be better. There's also a vegan pediatrician who spoke here at one of our Veggie Fest Presents seminars earlier this year. And that actually brings up a point I really want to make, is that I'm very happy all of you are in the room right now and you're able to hear this, and that's great, and hopefully you remember enough to share with somebody. But the most important people are not in this room, and they're not necessarily your friends and family, they're the kids. The kids are not in this room, and they're the ones who need this information the most. Don't let them live the lie that we were taught with our food pyramids and all that nonsense we were taught, that you need meat in every meal. The kids will not get the disease if we feed them right, and it's our responsibility to raise them that way. So let's make sure that we share this and keep the animal products outside of our youth. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duggal, for everything that you've given us today. Can you talk just briefly about sustainability with animal agriculture? If we keep going in the direction that we're going, what's happening to the planet? Very quickly now we're starting to see as a result of animal agriculture. And then do you feel better? Like, I noticed for myself, I tried to go plant-based about 2 years ago, and I struggled quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And now I'm on 9 months, and it's so much easier now. There's so many more restaurants. There's so many more grocery stores where I can get the foods that I need. So it's almost like I feel like 2019 is the year of the vegan. Like, am I alone in that? Or
not at all. We're all with you on that. We are all with you on that. So first part was about sustainability for our environment and the world, and I think it's a great question. There is so much data on what factory farming does to our planet, and it's very simple. It kills it. It kills it. And they've done research that shows by the year 2050, plant-based protein products are going to be outselling actual animal products solely due to the sustainability of it. We use so much more water and resource to raise a cow on a factory farm, to slaughter it, and to get that to the store for a meal than we would if we just grew vegetables there. It's like 20 times the amount of water. It's insanely different. And so it's a great thing to bring up, because although that wasn't part of this talk, it's absolutely a part it's something affecting all of us. Our world is changing. Our rainforests, which have all the diversity, and that's where our medicine comes from, is all those plants, they're being cut down. We're losing out on so much of our world and how good this place could be because we're raising animals to kill them and eat it. And with plants, we're actually leaving the world better off. We're putting nutrients back into the soil so that the next generation, and then the next generation, they have a better world to live in. And so you're absolutely right. If we all made steps, even if we didn't go the whole way, but just make steps to be more plant-based, we would be doing a great service, not only to the present world, but also to the future world. And as far as the ease with which it is to be vegetarian, way easier. Again, I talked about my college days. We had no options, spaghetti and grilled cheese. Going to a restaurant when I was younger, it was easy to figure out what you wanted to eat on the menu because there was one thing. That was it. I remember going to school dances when I was in high school, and everyone's parents were like, oh, we're going to go to the steakhouse. Yeah, I know what I'm getting, pasta primavera. That's the only thing you have. So it's changed tremendously. There's in downtown Chicago, there's a new vegan restaurant every month. Every month there's a new place opening up. And although it's, again, not eating animals, it's plant-based, it should be thought of as a step. The more we can eat real food coming from the ground, the more we can eat at home and cook and learn to cook again, that is better for us. Less salt. Because at the end of the day, if you look at a restaurant, they want you to come back and spend money. And that's their duty, so it makes sense. But they're going to make the food saltier, fattier than it needs to be, fry it a little bit more than it needs to be because it tastes better. And then you'll come back and buy it again. So the less and less of that we can do, the better. But you're right, grocery stores, farmers markets, they're popping up everywhere. It's becoming a lot easier to go vegetarian, to go vegan, and to go plant-based. So it's been a huge movement. I think the world is seeing it. There's a great resource if you're ever traveling. It's called Happy Cow. Anybody here ever used Happy Cow? It's pretty amazing. We went on our honeymoon to Tokyo, and we were able to find vegan Japanese food in Tokyo. It's incredible. Like, we found vegan sushi. They actually don't, that's not a normal thing for them. Everything is fish. And it was astounding. So you can go to any place in the world and you'll find vegetarian food, and you're definitely going to find more of it. We went with my mother-in-law here 2 years ago. We went to Iceland and found vegan crepes in Reykjavik. Like, go figure. It's all out there. All right, one right here. In the third row here. Okay, you got a mic coming to you.
Thank you, doctor. This is very helpful. Just two quick questions. One is milk, and your thoughts on milk as a building block for kids for protein. Do you think a kid is okay not having dairy growing up? And the second question is the protein sources. The slide was excellent in terms of different sources. But with regards to soy or some of the complete protein sources like edamame, for example, do you have recommendations on thresholds for specific kinds of sources so that you don't overdo on any one particular or the other? Because that has to have an effect on your body as well. If you're having 1 gram protein per based on just soy, that has to have an impact as well.
Absolutely. So for the first question, which was about dairy consumption in the youth especially, first I'll tell you, I loved milk growing up. In fact, I used to drink 4 glasses of milk a day, minimum. I loved it. And a buddy of mine in college, who was a little out there, he started telling me that milk was horrible, and I had this huge, like, ongoing debate with this guy for months. I'm like, you're crazy. Milk is so good for you. What do you mean? I was a subject to marketing. That's all it came down to. I was a subject to Michael Jordan's picture with a milk mustache. And that sold me. Hey, if I could be like Mike, I'm gonna drink milk. First of all, I never got to be like Mike. But milk is horrible. Milk is horrible, and that's unfortunately the truth. And the dairy industry is right there with the meat industry in Washington, and they have all the money, and they bought all the lobbyists, and they bought all the politicians. That's all it is. Milk is horrible. And again, there is no need for a cow's milk to raise my child, ever. None. It doesn't make sense. And there's no other species in the world that drinks another species animal's milk. You know, cows don't go up to pig moms and drink their milk. It doesn't make sense. A gorilla doesn't go to a lion. It doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, why do it? So that's my take on milk for the youth. It's terrible. With regards to the balance, yes, I think extremes of anything are bad. If you eat all one thing or all this thing, you're not going to get a well-balanced nutritional diet. So it's important that you develop a palate for everything and have a lot of things. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have them all in one meal, but you should have a balanced diet. I remember in a prior practice, we used to always test people's nutritional deficiencies and also their allergies. And every time we tested their allergies, everything that people would show up positive for what they were allergic to is what they were eating. Like people who ate bananas a lot and, oh, I've been on this banana kick, boom, bananas showed up as like a 3+. Every time. And it was just like, okay, so all I could take of that is that a balanced diet is sustainable and is good for your body. And if you're eating too much of anything at once, it's not good. So I wouldn't have a specific threshold on item to item. I would just say make sure there's a healthy balance.
How much emphasis should we place on organic fruits and veggies?
Well, so that's a great question. Again, something I used to be a skeptic on. I used to be a skeptic on organic because you look at a banana and you're like, oh, the peel's so thick, what difference does it make? It's not affecting the fruit inside. But when you look at the companies and what they're actually putting on the vegetables and fruits and grains to grow them, it's a huge difference. And so I would put a huge emphasis on it. I think if it's doable, do it. It's definitely pricier. There's no question about that. So there are farmers markets, there are co-ops where you can get organic food for more reasonable prices. There's food shares, there's all sorts of different avenues now. I think there's something called like ugly fruits. You know, anybody heard of this? Where you can buy like the fruits that don't look aesthetically great, but they're just as nutritious. And so there's a lot of avenues to find it in a financially doable way. But I would put a huge emphasis on it. You know, you look at Monsanto and some of the other companies that grow a lot, and they're now paying out hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in lawsuits because they're causing cancer, and now we know it. So when people are spraying pesticides, they're pumping all these things full of antibiotics and hormones. Not only is that going into the product, whether it's a food, grain, or animal, it's going into us. And if we don't want to consume junk, we shouldn't. So I would put a big emphasis on organic, fresh, and you know, local has actually been also shown to be better health-wise for you. We're products of our environment, so we can tolerate the products that are grown in our environment better than we can things that are not from our environment. So I know, like, if you try honey from all over the world, they're different, completely different, and some are good for you, some are bad. I know honey's not a vegan product, but vegetables, fruits, if they're grown closer to you, they're better for you than the ones that are further, unless they're not available in your system, or in your area, then you do whatever you can get.
Last question is in the corner.
Okay.
Yes, I have a two-part question.
Okay.
One is the GMOs that is currently in excess in soy products, and the other is excessive sugar and carbohydrates in a plant-based diet. how can that be addressed?
Okay, so GMOs, bad. That's pretty simple. If you're genetically modifying organisms to produce more of that crop, and you're right, soy is the number one genetically modified organism in the world as far as volume. So if you can get away from GMOs, it's better. There's not a lot of long-standing research as far as data available yet. So it's one of those areas where we think it's probably not as bad or not as good for you, but since there's not data stating that it's bad yet, companies are getting away with it quite a bit. A similar but different parallel would be the vaping with cigarettes. We know cigarettes are bad. You know, back 50 years ago, doctors were up here telling you to smoke, that it was good for you, because the doctors were paid off, right? Now we know smoking's bad, but now everyone sold these vaping things as, oh, this is better for you. We're going to put B12 in the vape juice. It'll be good. Well, as the data has just started coming out in the last few months, everyone's clearly realized, okay, this is also really, really bad. So genetically modified organisms' effect on human health hasn't had great long-term studies. And because it's, it hasn't been going around so long that we have long-term studies yet, I think they're getting away with it, so I would be cautious. I can't tell you exactly the truth to that because we don't have the evidence, but I would think based on my research that it's probably not in your best interest. So if you could avoid genetically modified, that's better. Now with regards to carbohydrates and sugar, excess of anything is bad. But what's very interesting is if you look at sugar versus sugar substitutes, they have a very drastically different result on how you react to it as far as your body. So Coca-Cola. In America, Coca-Cola is only used with high fructose corn syrup. It's not made with regular sugar. You get Mexico's Coke, it's made with regular sugar. What is the difference? The difference is that sugar has clear receptors in your body that respond to satiety or a sensation of being full. Essentially, enough is enough. Right? So if you're having real sugar and it's going, whether it's a fruit source or Coca-Cola or whatever, it's going into your body, at some point sugar will saturate all of your receptors and your body will say, I'm good, I'm done. High fructose corn syrup does not do that. Your body is tricked. It's a synthetic sugar that fools your receptors enough to not get a sensation of fullness. And the easiest way to look at this is to go to a 7-Eleven. There's a super double big gulp. It's like a gallon of soda. How could any human consume that? It's astounding. It's amazing. Who can consume 64 ounces or whatever it is of soda straight? It's crazy. But it fools your system because it's not sugar. So I think if you're eating real plants, real vegetables, and actually real fruits primarily with sugar and grains, your body reaches a fullness. And if you're eating real, true food, your body will say enough is enough. Now, there is always overconsumption. So the biggest reason that I've found for people consuming more than they should is speed. We are not chewing our food. We're not mindful of eating. We're either watching TV and scarfing something down, or we're in conversation with someone, so we're not paying attention to how quickly we're swallowing. But if you chew your food enough, which is what our teeth are built for, another genetic thing, our teeth are not built to cut up meat. They're built to grind vegetables. If you chew enough, it breaks down, your body has time to actually take the food in your stomach and digest it, and finally send a signal to your brain that the stomach has expanded enough to say, I'm full, I don't need to eat anymore. When you eat fast, that doesn't happen. You take a few bites, you shove it through, your stomach keeps expanding, and it happens so fast that it can't tell your brain to stop. So if you ever look at these speed eaters, like these hot dog eating contests, they're scarfing. Because if you think about it, how are they not vomiting right there, right? How can you put that much stuff into your system at one time and not throw it up? It's because they're going fast. And if they actually sat there and chewed their food and actually properly ate and swallowed, there's no way they could eat like, 180 hot dogs in 2 minutes or whatever they do. It's not physically possible. So you have to slow down. And I know we're living in a society where we're often eating in front of a TV, or it's a big social gathering. And culturally, everywhere, food is a very big social, cultural thing. Every holiday is a feast. It's family gets together, we eat a lot, right? So just try to be conscious of it and to try to eat slower and to maybe talk less while you're eating. You'll end up eating less food because you'll get full because your brain will tell you to stop. So I don't think that if it should be a huge concern if we're eating real food and we're eating a little slower. Again, thank you all. It's been an absolute pleasure.